So this is the brand new Polar Grid X2, not the X2 Pro. That came out a year ago. This is the Grid X2, and that's notable because it's been 5 years since its predecessor, the Grid X, not one, just the Grid X, came out. And of course, all my thoughts are based on real-world testing of this watch over the last little while. Swimming, cycling, running, more running, even stand-up paddleboarding for that matter. Now, I'd argue this is a much more interesting watch and release than some people are giving credit for. So first up, what is different from the original Polar Grid X? Now first off, the price, but not in a horrifically bad way. Keep in mind, the previous watch came out 5 years ago, and this sees a mere €50 increase from $429 to $479. Now, when the original Grid X1 came out 5 years ago, it felt overpriced for what it was, but they've added a ton of features since then, both to that watch and other watches along the way. However, from a pricing standpoint, what is notable here is it's not launching in the US, at least not initially. Polar simply says, quote, later for the US, and obviously that's because of tariffs and trade wars. This unit is made in China. It says it right on the back right there, and thus it's likely Polar can't figure out how to price this watch when the tariffs are changing virtually every single day. So that'll come later on, but hopefully it comes at roughly the same price as what the Euro side is, because it's a pretty strong deal. And hey, a quick note, if you're finding this video interesting or useful, just simply watch it all the way through to the end. That is the only thing the YouTube gods care about, and it really does help this video and the channel quite a bit. Now, as I said, the very first thing to talk about here is all the new features since then. So there's a lot of new features. I'm going to put them all right there because there's just so many of them, and I'm not going to make you listen as I read through every single one there. Instead, I want to focus on a couple core ones. Number one, they've added maps, just like the Polar Vantage M3, the V3, the Grid X2 Pro, all of the same lineage there, because they're all sharing the same operating system. And it's kind of really neat to see Polar shift towards that, and I'm going to talk about Polar's new Polar OS 4.0 in just a second. So you have maps built in for both North America as well as Europe at a base level, but then you can download more detailed maps for your given region, state, country, whatever it may be from Polar's site. Those are a couple gigs. There's 32 gigs of storage in here, so plenty of space for downloading lots and lots of detailed maps. And with those new detailed maps, as part of Polar OS 4.0, comes points of interest. So now you can see things like campsites and cafes and whatever the case may be. Now, another big ticket item that you're going to see on this compared to the original Grid X1 is multi-band or dual frequency GPS. And not to spoil some of my accuracy section later on, but the GPS is really good on this as long as you're on land. But the rest of it we'll get to in just a second. It's also got Polar's latest optical heart rate sensor in there, which also, not to spoil, some of my later section is a bit of a hit or miss thing. And some things are very, very good and some things are a little bit rougher. And then with that new optical heart rate sensor, there's nightly skin temperature tracking, there's ECG, though not medically certified ECG, just a manual ECG you can do, but it doesn't detect AFib or do any sort of passive AFib detection behind the scenes. So keep that in mind. It's a little bit different there, but it is at least an option on the watch. And then with that AMOLED display, because in the past it was a MIP-based display, you also get the virtual flashlight. So you can just simply swipe down from the top. I can swipe over right there and have the flashlight. Now, it's not an LED flashlight, but you know, this is enough to get around a dark room. It's not really enough to like light up trails and stuff like that in the dark. You need like a real flashlight for that. But for getting around a room in the middle of the night, a hotel room, stuff like that, no problems there. Now, there are two notable decreases from the original Grid X. First off, they reduced the waterproofing spec from 100 meters down to 50 meters. I suspect because they want you to buy the more expensive Grid X2 Pro, which has the 100-meter spec. And then the second piece is they've reduced the battery life specs across the board. Of course, going from a MIP-based display to an AMOLED display, that does happen, though we've seen companies get really close lately. In any case, you go from 40 hours of GPS time down to 30 hours, and then on the ultra long, basically economy mode, you go from 100 hours down to 90 hours. Okay, so the long and the short of that whole section right there is simply that it is using the new platform with all the new sensors, both the GPS as well as the optical heart rate sensor. It's got a new processor in it, it's faster, and of course, the AMOLED display. So now is a good time then to talk about the question of how is it different than the Grid X2 Pro that came out a year ago? That's priced a whole lot more than this thing is here. Well, essentially it comes down to case and materials more than almost anything else. So the Grid X2 Pro is effectively a 49mm watch versus this is a 45mm watch, though honestly this feels like a bigger watch than it is because of just like the overall design. I don't know why it is, but if I compare a 45 on something like an Apple Watch to this feels like a bigger watch. Not in a bad way, just it simply does. Now both watches actually have a stainless steel bezel on the outside edge, which is kind of nice, though in the case of the Titan edition, the titanium edition of the Grid X2 Pro, it is titanium for the lugs and sort of the overall case, though the back is plastic on both of the watches. The battery is roughly 50 to 60% bigger in that larger case size. Again, more space, bigger battery, and as a result, you get longer battery lifetime. This is not rocket science. You can see the exact numbers at the bottom there. But beyond that, everything else feature-wise and spec-wise is the same. The same military spec, the same dual frequency, the same USB-C, the same Bluetooth, everything else is the same. Every single software feature is also identical as well, which is super important. And that then leads into Polar's sort of push over the last year and a half, or whatever it is, year and a half, towards their standardized operating system on their watches, or at least all their higher-end watches. And so with this OS 4.0 that is now arriving on these watches, you've got a whole new slate of features, and those are also right there. So the points of interest that I mentioned earlier on, I've added a Find My Phone feature, a couple new watch faces, some notifications, and some restyling of user interface. So for example, when I open up a sport to do that sport, you'll see it's a bit revamped there, and a few other minor things here and there. They've also added turn-by-turn guidance, notably including when you import in from not just Komoot, but now Strava or GPX files, etc. However, somewhat annoyingly, you have to turn that turn-by-turn guidance on after you've started the workout. I don't understand why. Like, you choose the route, cool, and then once you've started, press start to like go, then you have to go back in the settings and re-enable the turn-by-turn guidance, which makes absolutely no sense to me. Like, obviously, if I chose a route, it's because I want to know what the route is. Like, why are you making me do this again? Any case, at least you can turn it on and get going. As usual, you'll also, of course, get notifications when you go off course. Okay, so with all the differences out of the way, let's talk about accuracy. I'm basically into two different groups here. Number one being heart rate, and number two being GPS. Starting off with this relatively easy trail run, it did have some steep up and downs and stuff like that, but it was at an easy pace. It was supposed to be an easy pace anyways, so nothing that was super crazy hard here, and did a really good job in tracking this. I had no problems. It matched the heart rate strap spot on, so good job there. If I go to this next run here, these were a bit longer sets here, not too high intensity, and it did a really good job of tracking these across the board, so good job there. Then I look at yesterday's 400-meter repeats, and that's just like proper dumpster fire. Like, it's as simple as that. I mean, it starts off bad, it gets good for a few minutes, and then it seems to miss 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, it missed all the intervals. All 6 intervals, it just, nope, didn't do it. Said no. And I don't get why, because this should have been a really easy run for it to track. These were not crazy intense intervals. They were 400s, but they were kind of easy 400s. So I wasn't doing like sprints or anything like that. The weather was warm. It was like ideal conditions, nice and snug. So it's a bit off. Then we have an indoor cycling workout here. And you can see it's overall pretty good, except the 2 moments it misses are sprints yet again. So in this case, it completely missed a really hard sprint towards the end, and it kind of like half missed a little bit of a surge in the middle there. Then look at this ride here in the mountains, like 2.5 or so hour ride, something like that. And you can see it's actually really good for a wrist-based optical heart rate sensor. In fact, far better than I was expecting. You see those drops right there? That's the Garmin HRM 600 having a bad day. I haven't troubleshot why that did that on that ride, but it did something there, either the heart rate strap or the computer that was connected to it. One of the two was having a bad day. But in any case, the actual heart rate data from the watch here, the Polar, was pretty good. A couple minor sprints and surges at the end that it seemed to skip, but overall, I'm actually really impressed with the performance for an outdoor ride, which tends to be very, very difficult. Anyways, for GPS side, looking at the trail one first, no problems there at all. It was absolutely spot on there compared to the Fenix 8, the Forerunner 970, zero issues. Again, another run, zero problems there, repeating kind of the same loop over and over and over and over again, and it was exactly the same every single time. And then we go up into the mountains while riding. It was spot on. Even these switchbacks here, both high speed and low speed, proper back and forth switchbacks, no issues. So then we get to the swim. That's the open water swim that I just got back from like 20 minutes ago or so. And I haven't actually made the comparison sets yet. I don't need to, because when I finished the swim, I already knew it was bad. Given that it was showing over 3,000 meters, or 3137, and I only swam like 1,800, 1,900 meters in reality. So I knew things without even looking at the actual map. Here is the map. Not good, Polar, not good at all. So hopefully you're not a swimmer. If you're a swimmer, I'd be skipping this one for now. So overall GPS accuracy on the land, it's great. In the water, not good at all. So let's then talk about kind of my final thoughts on this watch. And I think the first thing I would note is that, one, I'm impressed that Polar is keeping the pricing, at least like in the same realm of pricing, which, given all the crazy ass price increases we've seen over the last 6 to 8 months, especially from Garmin, for example, seeing their prices just skyrocketing on Forerunner series, on the Fenix series, to have only a €50 increase in 5 years, good job, Polar. Now, What's going to happen once they decide to do US pricing? Who knows, right? It could be something moderate like $4.99, or it could be something crazy pants like $5.99, in which case they're entirely dead in the water there. So overall, while there are a couple of quirks with this watch, it's actually a pretty good watch overall. I'd love to see a couple things on the software side get revamped. I'd love to see the Polar Flow app get a solid update. It needs an update. It's feeling pretty aged at this point. And I think even the user interface on this watch also could use a bit of a continued tweaking and updating, just to make things a little more condensed in some areas, and a little bit cleaner and clearer in other areas. Like the sleep tracking, for example, is just sort of like everything thrown against the wall. I'd like to see that be cleaned up a little bit as well. Anyways, overall, a good job Polar on this watch. Interested to see what happens once the pricing for the US side comes out, but until then, well done. So with that, thanks for watching. If you want plenty more sports tech, just simply hit the subscribe button. That's, you know what to do. Have a good one.